Afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk basically from my own experiences with producing horses and stuff, and hopefully we can all learn by it. So basically the title is Embracing the Knowledge of the Global Market to Make Progress at Farm Level. So the marketplace for show jumpers, thankfully it's a very, very global market, so it is. And if we use it to our advantage, this can be more lucrative than the national hunt breeding is to Ireland. Like, we have a full world market. National hunt is basically Ireland and England. We can sell America, Canada, Europe, Eastern Europe, United Arab Emirates, and China. Now, a few of these markets do need some work on. I would say Europe are nearly the weakest one at the moment because they're self-sufficient with their own breeding policy. But as in the other markets, United Arab Emirates and China, like it's a massive market waiting to be tapped into. But we need to have the right article to suit this. So the demographics of customers are now very, very wide and varied. We have everyone from 15-year-old girls to Ludger Beerbaum looking for show jumpers and everything that goes in between. But the type of horse that we need, obviously we can all sell the superstar, but if you take a look at, say, the Global Champions Tour or the 5-star level, like if you take 100 horses out of that category, and that's all horses sort of 9 to 16-year-old, and there's only maybe 100. You take those 100 away, and there's not very many horses left. So to succeed in breeding a superstar is very, very difficult. Now, that doesn't mean we stop trying to do it, because if we aim to breed the superstar, and he doesn't make it, hopefully it will suit another part of the market. And there's one common denominator I find between a very, very good show jumping horse and also a good amateur horse. They will both have an extremely good canter, because the canter, it gives the power to be the superstar horse, and it also makes him easier to ride for the person to go and win classes. But if you're a normal rider and a normal amateur rider, if he's a good canter, he's always nicer to ride, so he is. So under the types of horses, normally I find the American and Canada market the most useful for us. Now, they're looking for ready-to-go horses, as I call them. They're horses that are well produced, they're nice to ride, they're probably 7-year-old plus. Yes, we can sell the younger horse if he's a superstar, but they're not all superstars, so it's really from the 7-year-olds upward that we can make decent money out of our horses. But one thing, they have to be nice to ride, and they must be able to do their lead changes. What makes a horse easy to get lead changes? Again, it's back to the canter. If they have a nice balanced canter with some hock action, normally they change legs without even nearly asking them. The other thing is not to go down the line of breeding too careful of jumpers. Like the careful horse that can jump 160 and he needs the good ride, that's fine for the top professional. But again, most of the riders aren't this. So if horses are too careful and people still want to jump 130, 140, it's better that they've more scope than carefulness, and there will be a much more bigger demand for this type. So that the 130 to 145 level is a very, very popular. But I would say 85% of the people that come into the yard, they're small girls. They're not, so again, they have to be blood types and nice to ride. So how do we go about breeding and producing suitable horses? The type and the model required. First of all, there have to be a quality, blood, modern type of a horse. So what is that? For starters, he must have a good looking head. It's very, very important with the amateur clients that they walk in and the first thing they see, oh, hasn't he a beautiful head? If you have a horse with a big sort of wardrobe of a head, it would nearly walk past and you wouldn't even get a chance to start jumping them. They also must have a good front, not too short a front, because with a nice front and the head set on the neck at the correct angle, really you don't have to be a brilliant jumper or a brilliant rider to get the horse in shape and feel like you're a good jockey. He's naturally built that way and he goes in a good outline. Again, making him nicer and easier to ride. A nice sloping shoulder, it makes him a freer mover, but also for getting the front end out of the way, it's much easier for them. And again, with amateur riders and maybe not getting good distances and stuff and getting too close, at least the horse has a better chance of being better in front. They must have a strong back and a strong hind end, not a low back, being weak, and also this aids the canter. Active hocks for me is very, very, very important. If a horse has stiff hocks, normally in my eyes, they have a stiff mouth also, and they're always against the hand and harder to close, harder to teach anything in the flat work. So active hocks, we'll speak about it later, maybe with foals. I would always, when selecting foals, try and have a foal that's active of his hocks. Front legs, basically fairly straight, not too back of the knee. Basically, in my eyes, front legs are made to land on. So if they're good enough, they're not going to give you trouble, that they're not too back of the knee or too springy, the pasterns, I would live with being a little bit turned in or turned out. And the hind leg for me is the most important part of the jumper, because that's where the engine comes from. If he hasn't got a powerful hind leg, you're always at a disadvantage, whereas it's more difficult to ride. If the hind leg and the hock is out behind the horse, he's more difficult to close. If it's a hooky hind leg, he doesn't have the same power. If he's got a very straight hind leg, he also doesn't have the same power. So it's important to have a good, strong hind leg. I would be a little bit biased. I think this is Pacino. As a 5-year-old, in my eyes, I've rode a lot of horses, but for me, he was the perfect model in a modern day show jumper. Even from an early age, he was a tall horse. He was 17 hands, but even from an early age, when he was 3, he would ride better than most 8 and 9-year-olds. But if we look at his model, it's down to his model and his gait that he was easy to ride. He had a lovely sharp head, so he had the head was on the neck at a good angle. He was never against your hand when you were working him on the flat. He had a lovely front, not too short. There's nothing worse than a little short neck and the ear stuck in your mouth when you're riding them. And then you can never get a horse to sort of lengthen his stride and just make it a nice outline. He had a good sloping shoulder, front leg, as I say, fairly good, straight. He was a little bit turned in if you saw him from the front, but again, as I said, with show jumpers, as long as they're good enough to land on, they will do me. He had a strong back, strong hind end. He had a very, very good canter, so he had. And as you see, the hind legs was always underneath him. No matter what stride he took, he was always in balance and had the power in the hind leg sitting underneath him. So from the model, then we go on to the movement. With show jumpers, the walk and the trot isn't the most important, so it's not. Yes, you like a nice, loose, active walk and trot, but one thing I noticed there with Irish breeders, especially at sales there with foals or whatever, they'll be trotting up foals and they'll be saying how good a model he is. God, he'd trot down the length of the school in five steps. In my eyes, I could think of nothing worse, because by the time you get him into a canter, he's probably nearly ran into the end wall of the indoor because you can't get him closed up. So as long as it's loose and active in the walk and the trot, that will do me. But again, going to the canter, for me, it's the most important thing. He must have good hock action, flexible of the hock. He must canter in an uphill way. That will make him more balanced. He'll be lighter on the ground. He'll have a good stride length is important, because one thing, if a horse is a little bit long of his stride, but he has hock action and he's balanced, it's very, very easy to teach him to shorten his stride. Whereas if you don't have stride, it's nearly impossible to put stride into a horse, no matter how good a jockey you are. And somewhere in a course, the course builder will catch you out, because it's, you're always kicking and you're a little bit sort of faster than you'd want to be. And as I say, the course builder will always catch you out somewhere. And it's also important then in the canter that the hind leg comes easily in underneath the horse. If it comes in underneath, 1, he has a good chance of being a very, very good jumper. But 2, it will also be a nicer, easier horse for an amateur to ride. So we said, these are the things we want for the model, but what is the reason of that? First of all, it makes the horse easier and more pleasurable to ride. If he's a good canter, you can be nearly guaranteed he will have a nice mouth. He'd be able to carry himself, and no matter what rider you put up onto him, they will feel comfortable and in control. Easier to lengthen and shorten. The most important thing in modern day show jumping, the course builder is always trying to knock you out of your rhythm. So it's essential that the lengthen and shorten comes so simple and so easy. And also, it will make horses stay sounder for longer. If a horse is built the right way and canter and jump then the right way, he also is much easier on himself. And then in turn, he makes a better shape over the fence and hopefully leave more poles in the cups. So, this is a video of Pacino, and it's just to maybe give an example of maybe why he was the horse he was. For me, He had a really, really good canter. He was always in balance. This is him as a 7-year-old. It's his first 150 class. It was the Grand Prix in Cavan. But you know, he was only 7. He hadn't done an awful lot of jumping as a 4, 5, and 6-year-old. But he just made life simple. You can see that he's active with his hocks. He carries himself. And then when he gets to the fence, he jumps the right way. He doesn't shoot himself too much at the fence. He backs up off it and makes a good shape. As a younger horse, people would have knocked him that he was too long in front. But having experienced, you know, horses that have all the scope don't actually be too tidy in front as younger horses. It takes a little bit longer, you know, and also some of them don't have to make as much effort as the horse shorter scope. So obviously he's not trying as hard at smaller tracks. You can see here, this was, I think it was a normal 5 strides, but you could close him up, do 1 extra. And again, it's so simple, you know, it's simple and easy, you know, there's an easy bit in his mouth, you know, it's straightforward. But it's not down to my training, it's down to the makeup of the horse, the way he was made, the canter he had, and it just made it easy, so it did. So that's an example of him, and a good type of a modern day show jumper. So we go on now to the importance of the dam line. The dam line is for sure, and as you've listened to the 2 previous speakers, it is the most important thing. The dam is like 70% of what you're going to get. So she must be either a very good jumper herself or closely related to a good jumper. Certain shortcomings can be forgiven if the dam line is extremely strong. But what are those certain shortcomings? Maybe a little bit shorter scope, maybe which is easier to rectify. But if she's got a bad canter and maybe a bad model, and you're trying to sort out too many things that are wrong, maybe she's not the one to breed from, even though she has a good pedigree. The importance of finding the correct match for your mare is very, very important. Try not to double up as in a heavy type with a heavy type, careful with careful, bad canter with bad canter. So just because there's one horse top of the world, just because there's one horse on top of the world rankings doesn't mean that that horse is going to suit your mare. And this is on a personal note, the mare must have an active canter, because as we said before, they're not all going to be superstars, and they have to be able to do a certain job at a certain stage. This is a mare, it's a 5-year-old mare I just took for an example. I think this is a good modern day show jumper as well. She's 5-year-old, she's by Cicero Z. I also used her as an example of a good dam line also. Her dam is closely related to Carlina, that jumped with P.S. Switzer and is now with Yuri Kirchhoff. I also used her because she's a good example to other Irish breeders. This mare was bought as a yearling or a 2-year-old in Belgium. So it is possible to go out there and buy a good filly from a good family. Now, the breeder that owns this horse, or this mare, he has also taken a Demont foal out of her already. So he is blessed that now he is a good horse to probably sell come 6 or 7, but yet he still has the breed sitting at home. As a type, she is 16-2. She's got a really good canter. She's a careful jumper. She jumps a little bit open in front, but very, very good behind. And she's nice to ride. She's on a snaffle bridle. I only have her probably, I think, 12 weeks. So not an awful lot of professional work has gone into her. But she's very, very nice to ride. Good jumper, careful. And I think is going to be the makings of a very, very good horse in time to come. The other thing is, with Irish produced or Irish bred, we have one problem that sometimes the horses finish up with the wrong clients. Some horses are only as good as the people that are on them. So some of the good young horses that are produced in Ireland, okay, they're sold for good money, maybe to America, whatever, but end up with amateur clients, and unfortunately, they don't make the amount of progress that they should do. But money's money, and I'm sensible at the end of the day. So, a view of the marketplace here. Who is coming to buy them? We have all types of people coming to buy them, as we discussed before, from your 15-year-old girls to your professionals. Where are they buying them from? This is more from the breeder's point of view, a lot of the breeders go to the sales with foals. So I just want to speak. I'll give an example. This year in Gorge Bridge, there was 5 days of 3-year-olds. There was 1,200 3-year-olds, and I went through the catalogue back to front before I went there. And out of that 1,200 horses, I would have got it tight to put any sort of a mark or indication that I wanted to see them, more than maybe 80 horses. So that's what, about 8% of the total catalogue. So that's even before you've even pulled the horse out of the stable. You're only going down there to see probably 8 to 10% of the horses. So obviously, for show jumping, the breeders aren't breeding what we're looking for. So after that, there's probably event people. They might look at 20 to 25%. What have you then? Probably showing and hunting, which won't bring the percentage of horses being looked at high enough. So obviously, the wrong type has been bred. Same thing with foals. This September, the foal sale, you know, when you went through the catalogue, to go down and spend 4 or 5 days looking at foals that were spread over 5 days, it was hardly worthwhile going, because, you know, the mother wasn't strong enough, or, you know, it was the wrong cross. You didn't even have to go to see the type of horses that there were. So private sales, thankfully we have a lot of Irish guys in America that have gone out there this last sort of 8 to 12 years, and they are actually bringing back a lot of clients, so they are. So it's a good market to tap into, and I think we should make more use of it, so we should. How are we selling them? Basically, as I said, through contacts, and also through good results at shows with the younger horses. Good video made, send it to your contact, and if the horse suits, normally business is done. We also run a horse transport business, and what we find, the website are selling a lot of normal priced horses, but not in the upper class of horses. Dundee, we would ship a lot of horses that were bought, but again, small money, and just normal horses. YouTube, it's a great facility because it's easy to, if you have somebody make an inquiry, I try and have videos up of all the good young horses, and you can get things done quickly with it. So the type of foal being produced here compared to the continent. There is a limited supply of quality, well-bred foals in Ireland, but they do exist, and I don't want people going home saying, oh, you couldn't please him with a horse. Yes, we've high standards, but I know how hard it is to produce one, what's required, so you have to start off with the right raw material. But there's a number of breeders in this country, and they are actually doing a very, very good job. And don't forget, there's so many poor foals in the continent also. It's not just in Ireland that we have average foals. And when we speak, well, Irish people, I'm just sort of generalising here, we say, oh, that the continental horse is doing so much better. We seem to group together the French horse, the Belgians, the Dutch, and the Germans. And if you put them 4 up against the Irish horse, like, surely we're not going to produce as many as them. So, you know, don't be as hard on ourselves as what we are sometimes. So the type of foal being produced here compared to the continent. In general, the mares I find here, they're weak on pedigree. They're not related to any good jumpers. Normal models. So even though you do try and breed a nice type of horse, which might, okay, you mightn't be aiming to do the show jumping route, but you might be trying for either a show horse or eventing. They have to be a good model to justify covering them. Lacking athletic ability, blood, and quality. A lot of the mares, they're plain, not enough blood, and like, it makes no difference what you cross them with, whether you spend 4,000 on frozen semen. You can't bring your mare from too far back. If she's too far away from what you're aiming to breed, which is obviously the wrong mare that you're using, so you're going to have to, as the fella says, change mares. There's no competition record. And also with some of the mares in Ireland, I find that there is a competition record. Yes, they might have 100 show jumping points, but if you go and look, they maybe never jumped any more than a metre. For me, a competition record is animals that have jumped to a certain level, 140 or so. Yes, there's the odd exception where a mare might have got hurt or something like that, but this seems to be a general excuse for ones that aren't good enough with a lot of people, that, oh, she went breeding, she got hurt. The use of non-performance stallions is quite widespread in Ireland. The use of second-rate imported stallions is also wide here. I find that a lot of the horses that have some age on them that come back from Europe basically are ones that they're not happy with in Europe and they haven't made the grade. And then in my eyes, it's the use of fourth-rate thoroughbred stallions. When you think of the thoroughbred stallions that are in this country and the ones that are covering half-bred mares, they're far removed from Galileos and everything else. When you take the Flat, the National Hunt, the other sort of decent ones that are exported to other thoroughbred countries, you know, we are really dealing with the bottom of the bottom with thoroughbred stallions. So, with the type of mare and the stallions that we're using, obviously the foal being produced are of poor types, the pedigree are weak, they're unathletic with bad canters. So, even, you know, they're not even going to be pleasurable horses to ride. Again, if they have a bad canter as a foal, they'll have a bad canter as a 5, 6 and 7 year old also. And also, one thing I find with a lot of foals, they're poorly presented at sales. Again, some breeders do a fantastic job and are very, very well presented, but a lot of them, maybe they were caught the morning of the sale and the thistles are still hanging out of the tail, so they are. So, you know, this is a simple thing to be rectified. You know, it's just a bit of maybe laziness on some breeders' behalf. So, here's a foal I would have bought as 4 years ago. He is by Pacino out of a Aldatis mother that was back to La Fontaine, which was a thoroughbred. And what I liked about the foal, nice sharp head, nice front. When you saw him move, he was very, very scopy, a lot of power from behind. And last week, this is him as a 4-year-old. Now, he's only done 2 shows, and he was very green at this show. But I do think that this is another makings of a very, very good horse. He is very balanced. When he jumps careful. He jumps away from the pole. He uses his shoulder. You might say, oh, he's a little bit long in front, but the feeling he gives you that the shoulder comes up and the foreleg works. And like when it gets bigger and he gets a bit stronger and a bit sort of more competition practice, he will definitely be good enough in front. I wouldn't be worried at all about his front end. And as I say, he's scopy. You can't see from this picture, but very, very good behind. And you know, I hope he's the makings of a very, very good horse. But he was a nice foal. He grew into a nice horse. It does sort of add up. So, what can breeders do to produce for the global market? I think breeders definitely need to educate themselves. And the easiest way, go show jumping. There is so many breeders in this country that probably don't even go to a show. They try and judge stallions and crosses by reading the Farmer's Journal, the sales returns in the Farmer's Journal. That's no way to know what a stallion is like. You know, go show jumping, watch them jump. You'll know what stallions are making it. You have a selection of shows. You have the best ones to see young horses, obviously the Dublin qualifiers, the Irish Horse Board classes. If you're there and you sort of see, well, geez, there's none by such and such a horse, there's a reason for that. They weren't good enough to go there. So he's a stallion that nearly needs a line drawn through him. So it's simple for breeders, go show jumping more. They need to take a very critical look at their mares. And critical as in really know where the mare is. Is she know what you're aiming to breed? And is she too far away from what you want that the stallion, no matter what you use, can't make up for it? They have to move with the times. Use your best proven stallion available. Get out of the mentality of using the local stallion. I meant to bring a video of Pacino jumping as a 6-year-old, but the wrong one was put up here. And what I couldn't understand, Pacino as a 6-year-old, for me, you know, he ticked every box. But like I heard from so many people, you know, oh, you're up in Monaghan, you know, I'm down in Tipperary here, it's so far away. People have to get out of that mentality because, you know, using the local stallion, if he's a machine or whatever, great, you're very blessed to be beside him. But if he's not, you're only breeding trouble and something that you won't be able to get rid of. Breeders must bring their young stock to the right people. And breeders have to decide too is, you know, to get a really good return, sometimes it's not being sold as a foal or a 3-year-old, that he must be produced further on to get a proper return. As in, a very well-produced 5 or 6-year-old. Now, if he's brought to the wrong person, that horse is going to be lost. If he's brought to the right person, he'll get a chance and be produced and make the best possible money that he can. And I think breeders need to start thinking a little bit outside the box. New techniques. 3 weeks ago, I had Joris the Brabander come over to our yard, and he is from the Muse stud. And he gave the example, okay, he's at a great advantage that himself and his wife are both vets, so they could do the embryo transfers themselves. But Quirly Chin, who probably started off most of his success, this was about 15 or 17 years ago, he was able to sell her as a 6-year-old for very, very good money. But at that stage, he already had 16 offspring out of her. Now, I'm not saying that we can do it to the same level, but if we do a selection process early on and look at them at yearlings and 2-year-olds, whatever, and we think they're very, very good, why not take 2 out of them? And then, 1, you will find out whether you have a very good broodmare, and 2, if she's worth a lot of money, you're still able to sell her and still have the breed. So it's, you know, in my eyes, it's a win-win situation. There's also other new techniques coming up that I was just inquiring about, and it's oocyte harvesting, where they take the oocytes from the mare, and that is grown in the lab. Now, the advantage of that is that you don't have to get your mare in foal. It's when the mare is either shutting down or starting off or cycling. And if it's done, as I say, you could be lucky and get 5 to 8 oocytes. The semen can be cut down and not so much semen has to be used. And the other advantage is over the embryo transfer, you don't need a big herd of mares, that these frozen embryos can be thawed out at any stage when your mare is ready to take it, rather than having to carry a big number of mares. So it's something to think about. We're in a world that's progressing, and I think with the breeding, we're going to have to keep doing the same. So, thank you very much for your attention.